recently I've been working on my indie game, Endless Onslaught. If you haven't seen the last devlog, go check it out. And this week I decided to give myself just 7 days to program the enemies. This includes everything from spawning to pathfinding and is really hard, as anyone who's ever needed to add smart enemies to their game will know. First, I had to create the spawning conditions for the enemies. They needed to spawn anywhere not colliding with the foliage layer. This, unlike the pathfinding, was relatively simple. I just created a while loop where they would select a random coordinate from a list of possible ones whilst they were colliding with the foliage. This meant that, when the code found a possible spawning location, it would break out of the while loop. I'm sure there are better ways to do this, but this works and it's relatively fast. I did a strain test with 7 zombies and it loaded pretty much instantly. Now, the next part was the hard bit. Enemy pathfinding. This was the part of the game I was absolutely dreading, and rightly so. This took me about 10 hours to complete, and there are still adjustments I want to make. The first iteration of this was using the A-star pathfinding algorithm. Essentially, the zombie would create a path to the player based on a matrix that represented the map. At every point on that path, it would create a small rectangle and get the direction to the first rectangle. When the zombie collided with that, it would delete that from the list of these rectangles and create a direction to the next rectangle. Every 70 frames, it would check if the player's position had changed from the last check, and if so, update its path. If there were no more elements in the list of rectangles, it would check if it were under a tile's worth of pixels away from the player, and if so, create a vector to the player and move along that vector. Otherwise, it would create a new path. Now, this system worked, but it was really strange and janky. I just didn't like the final result, so I decided to implement line of sight. I would create rectangles at every obstacle according to the matrix that represented all the obstacles, and then draw a line between the player and zombie. If that line collided with any of the rectangles I'd created, line of sight would be false and it would use the A-star method. Otherwise, it would just move along a constantly updating vector to the player. Now, this system is good, and I'm going to keep it, but I still need to spend some time ironing out a few bugs, fixing the rotation, the zombie currently faces the player no matter what, and making the matrix more detailed for more accurate line of sight checks and A-star pathfinding. It's currently a 34 by 17 grid, representing a 4896 by 2448 map, so I will definitely fix that. But I'm happy with where the enemies are at the moment, and this system is definitely the one I'll stick with. Next week, I'm going to add some more features from old Endless Onslaught into the new game, like different gun types, the Master Zombie, Gun Flash, and more. Also, definitely check out Clear Code's tutorial on A-star pathfinding and Pie game. Without it, I don't know what I would have done.